People are terrified of silence. They're afraid of being alone because it forces them to hear the one voice they've been running from their whole lives, their own. But here's the truth. Until you learn to be at peace with your own presence, no relationship, no career, no escape will satisfy you. Being alone isn't a curse, it's the beginning of real self-awareness. Solitude, if used properly, becomes the ground where your identity is forged, not distracted by the noise of the world, but carved out in the quiet disciplines of your own mind. If you're always surrounded by others, always entertained, always occupied, you'll never have the space to ask yourself the most important questions. Who am I? What do I believe in? What do I want my life to stand for? Those answers don't come from crowds. They come from stillness. The mistake most people make is that they believe happiness comes from pleasure, from stimulation, from being constantly connected to others. But the paradox is this: the more you depend on the world to make you feel alive, the more you lose yourself when it changes or disappears. Happiness alone doesn't start when you get what you want. It starts when you stop needing anything external to feel whole. You must develop a structure in solitude. Without it, time becomes a burden and thoughts spiral. You need something to wake up for, something to build, something to strive toward a not for validation, but for growth. Routine becomes the framework for meaning, especially when no one is watching. It forces you to choose who you want to be, even when no one else is there to affirm it. And then there's the inner voice, the self-talk that either uplifts or sabotages. Most people never confront that voice. They drown it with distraction. But it's there always. And until you change it, until you master it, it will dominate your perception. Learn to listen without judgment. Then learn to speak back with strength and clarity. Train your mind like you train your body, with repetition, challenge, and deliberate effort. You're not broken because you're alone. You're not incomplete. Loneliness is not the absence of people, it's the absence of connection to yourself. Once you bridge that gap, once you realize you are enough, you stop looking for someone else to fill a void that was always your responsibility to fill. Create something. Right. Build. Move your body. Express yourself. Stop waiting for external permission to become who you're capable of being. Every time you create rather than consume, you reinforce your identity. You prove to yourself that you are not passive. You are not lost. You are in motion, and above all, embrace responsibility. Because nothing grounds you more deeply than taking ownership of your own path. No one is coming to save you. No one is obligated to understand your struggle. But that doesn't mean you're powerless. Quite the opposite. You have the ability to rebuild, to redirect, to rise, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Being happy alone isn't about rejecting others. It's about realizing that your value, your joy, your sense of purpose is yours to cultivate. And once you build that authentically, everything and everyone else becomes a bonus, not a necessity. So sit in the silence, lean into the discomfort, learn to be your own anchor. That's where true power begins. Let me know if you'd like a full 700-word expansion of any keynote, SEO metadata, or a visual thumbnail idea for this video. 1D4, 1D4, 0, 1D4, 4-letter 1D4, 4-letter 1D4. People associate being alone with being lonely, as if the absence of others somehow means the absence of meaning. But the truth is, solitude can be one of the most powerful tools for personal growth, provided it's approached with intention. When you're alone, you're no longer shaped by external noise. You're left with yourself, your thoughts, your beliefs, your doubts, and your truth. And it's in this space that real alignment begins to take place. Think about it. When you're constantly surrounded by opinions, conversations, social media feeds, and entertainment, your attention is always pointed outward. Your sense of self becomes scattered, fragmented, even distorted by the expectations and projections of others. You start responding more to the environment than to your own inner compass. You confuse noise for purpose. And that's where disconnection begins, not from the world, but from yourself. Solitude, then, is not a void to be feared. It is a mirror. A mirror that shows you what you've been avoiding, what you've suppressed, and what you need to confront. When you're alone, you start to notice the internal clutter, the unchecked emotions, the unfinished thoughts, the silent beliefs that have been running on autopilot. And here lies the power of solitude. It gives you the space to pause, observe, and reconfigure. It allows you to question, is this belief mine, or did I inherit it from someone else? Am I chasing a goal that truly aligns with my values, or one that was handed to me by society? These are the questions that can only arise when external distractions are removed, and you begin to tune in instead of reaching out. Solitude also helps reset your emotional equilibrium. Without the constant emotional energy of others influencing your state of mind, you begin to notice your emotional triggers and patterns with more clarity. You start to develop a sense of emotional independence. You learn how to calm yourself without needing reassurance, how to find joy in your own presence, how to validate your own journey without needing applause. That's not just strength, it's sovereignty. It's sovereignty. Because once you know how to steady your own ship in the stillness, no external storm can truly shake you. Many people fear solitude because it confronts them with their inner chaos. But that chaos was always there. It was just buried under the noise. Facing it isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. Growth rarely happens in comfort zones. It happens in the tension between who you are and who you could become. Solitude sharpens that tension and demands a response. You can either numb it with distractions or engage with it fully and consciously. And if you choose the latter, you begin to align your actions, values, and purpose in a way that no one else can define for you. Being alone doesn't mean being idle. Solitude isn't about doing nothing. It's about doing the inner work that often gets neglected, thinking deeply, journaling, reading, meditating, creating. It's the groundwork for alignment. When you build that foundation within, you walk back into the world not needing it to complete you, but ready to contribute something meaningful to it. Your presence stops being a demand on others and starts becoming a gift. In the end, solitude is not a prison. It is a sanctuary. It is the sacred space where you meet yourself without pretense, without pressure, and without performance. And when you can sit alone and be at peace, you have already won a battle that most people never even acknowledge. There's 0 letter 1d4 0 4 letter 1d4 0 for letter 1d4. Sheeter 1d4 0 iter 1d4 0 iter 1d4 0 0 d4 0 0 1 4 0 liter 1d4 0 0 1d4 0 in Dis chatty 40000 the 1d400001 of chair 1d40 the VCTC said a purpose on d4 0 juice you fall on the most. We've been conditioned to believe that happiness is tied to how much enjoyment or comfort we can experience. The problem with that belief is it leads people to constantly chase stimulation, food, sex, entertainment, likes, validation, without ever understanding why they feel so empty when the thrill wears off. Pleasure is fleeting. It spikes and then it drops, leaving you searching for the next hit. It doesn't ground you. It doesn't guide you. It distracts you from the deeper questions that actually lead to fulfillment. When you are alone and the distractions fade, that's when the void reveals itself. Not because being alone is wrong, but because you've been running from purpose. Purpose is deeper than any emotional high. It's not just about what feels good, it's about what feels right. It's the internal alignment between your actions and your core values, between your choices and your sense of meaning. When you live with purpose, you wake up with clarity even when life is hard. When you live for pleasure, you're at the mercy of your moods, constantly shifting based on what's happening outside of you. That's not happiness, that's dependency. It's a dangerous cycle. Especially when you're alone, because you start to feel like something's missing when in fact, it's your sense of direction that's gone missing. Purpose gives structure to solitude. It transforms isolation into intention. Instead of asking, why am I alone? Well, you start asking, what can I build in this space? That shift in perspective is everything. You start to realize that your alone time isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's time to develop your skills, cultivate your mind, and build the foundations for a life that means something. Not because someone else is watching, not because you'll get applause, but because it's your responsibility. Because it's yours to carry, and in that responsibility, you find strength. Purpose also gives you emotional resilience. When you know why you're doing what you're doing, it becomes easier to endure discomfort. You stop needing constant positivity or motivation. You develop discipline, not out of force, but out of clarity. You begin to separate what is pleasurable from what is meaningful. Well, and the more you choose meaning over momentary comfort, the more fulfilled you become, not in a shallow, feel-good way, but in a grounded, long-term way that sustains you when no one else is around. The paradox is that when you pursue purpose, you often find happiness as a byproduct. Not the kind of happiness that comes and goes, but the kind that stays quiet and steady within you. It's the kind that lets you sit in your own company without needing a distraction. It's the kind that lets you enjoy the moment without chasing something else. It's not glamorous. It's not glamorous. It's not loud, but it's real. If you're trying to be happy alone, don't start by trying to feel good. Start by asking, what am I here to do? That doesn't mean you need to have all the answers. It means you need to commit to the search. Read more. Reflect more. Learn who you are when there's no one to impress. Then build a life around that identity. The pleasure will come, but it will no longer be the goal. It will be the reward for living in alignment with something greater than the ego. In solitude, pleasure can feel empty if it's not grounded in purpose. But when you have purpose, even the smallest actions, waking up early, exercising, learning, creating, carry immense weight. They become expressions of who you are. And that's where true happiness begins. Not with what you consume, but with what you pursue. Not with what you feel, but with what you build. So don't run from the silence. Enter it with intention. Let it show you what really matters. Because in that space, purpose will speak. And when it does, listen. That's where happiness lives. King net it said, happin etten 1 and D4 1/6 were woman D 4 erar ter 1/6 third it vet 4 1 D 4 thorough 1D4 for pre-zeros it either one of the most assumptive river process learning through your own company. This isn't about becoming antisocial or rejecting relationships. It's about cultivating a deep, unwavering sense of inner peace that doesn't crumble in the absence of external validation. If your happiness depends on someone else being there, then it's not happiness, it's dependency. It's dependency. And dependency in the emotional sense can be a trap disguised as connection. Learning to enjoy your own company is not just a form of self-care. It's a form of personal power. It means you've reached a level of self-respect where your own presence is enough. It means that you've stopped outsourcing your joy to others. It means that you don't need constant entertainment, affection, or conversation to feel alive. And most importantly, it means that you've become your own sanctuary, not because you're perfect, but because you've accepted yourself fully, flaws and all. Most people are uncomfortable in solitude because they haven't yet developed a relationship with themselves. Think about it. If you can't sit quietly with your own thoughts for even 5 minutes without feeling restless or reaching for your phone, what does that say about the state of your inner world? It says there's work to be done. And that's not something to fear. It's something to embrace. Because once you start making peace with your thoughts, your fears, and your aspirations, you begin to build a foundation that no one else can shake. You become whole on your own. This process isn't easy. It requires you to face things you've been avoiding, unprocessed pain, unhealed wounds, insecurities you've buried under distractions. But these are the very things that must be confronted if you want to be free. And solitude gives you the perfect environment for that confrontation. It strips away the noise. It removes the masks. It demands honesty. And with honesty comes growth. When you enjoy your own company, you gain clarity. You start to hear your own voice over the voices of others. You begin to make decisions based on your own values rather than other people's expectations. You become selective about the company you keep, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. Because once you know the peace of being with yourself, you stop tolerating relationships that disturb that peace. You raise your standards not just in romance or friendships, but in how you live your life overall. You also become more creative, more thoughtful, more focused. Without constant stimulation, your mind begins to wander, not aimlessly, but productively. You start generating ideas, setting goals, creating plans. You notice details in life that you used to overlook. You become more present. And in that presence, you find appreciation. Simple things start to carry meaning again. A walk in nature, a cup of tea, a journal entry, a book, a moment of silence. These are the things that connect you back to yourself. Enjoying your own company doesn't mean you don't want people around. It means you're not dependent on them for your happiness. And ironically, the more comfortable you are alone, the healthier your relationships become. Why? Because you're not entering them from a place of need. You're entering from a place of wholeness. You're able to give not because you're empty and hoping to be filled, but because you're full and ready to share. So if you're seeking happiness alone, begin here. Get to know yourself, not the version of you that performs for others, but the version that exists when no one's watching. Invest time in self-reflection. Create habits that nurture your body and mind. Learn to laugh alone, cry alone, celebrate alone. You miss the growth that comes from sitting in silence and asking hard questions. You miss the creativity that surfaces only when the mind is uncluttered. You miss the power of hearing your own voice without it being drowned out by others. Disconnection is not a weakness, it's a wisdom move. It's saying, I value my peace more than your opinion, and living in alignment with that truth. This world isn't going to slow down for you. It's going to keep speeding up. So it's on you to draw the line, to decide that your energy, your time, your attention, and your presence are sacred. To retreat not to escape life, but to build the strength to face it better. Don't wait for burnout to teach you what boundaries could have. Choose to disconnect not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. Because in the stillness of disconnection, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself. You find yourself. For letter 1D, for X0 for 1D 40 for 1D 40 letter 1 to 4 for O 1D 40 for 1D 4 1D 40 1D 40 letter 1 to 1 3 4 and 6 for 1 for after 1D 4 1 to give us another for 1 to 1 to 1 to 4 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to stand that's a fun skip. But being alone is a physical state. No one else is around you. Loneliness, on the other hand, is emotional. It's the feeling of being disconnected even when others are near. So many people chase relationships, friendships, and social validation not because they genuinely crave connection, but because they are terrified of facing themselves. They are terrified of silence because silence has a way of amplifying what's been ignored. But what if instead of running from that stillness, you learn to embrace it? What if you used solitude not as a punishment, but as a practice? Aloneness, when approached intentionally, becomes a powerful space for healing and rebuilding. It's where you separate yourself from the noise of other people's opinions, expectations, and projections, and begin to hear your own voice again. And often that voice has been buried under years of trying to be accepted, trying to fit in, trying to please everyone but yourself. There's something liberating about realizing that your peace doesn't have to depend on who chooses to stay or leave. That your self-worth doesn't have to be tied to how many people text you, call you, or like your posts. Real confidence is built when you know how to enjoy your own company. For the word own company, when you can sit with your thoughts, your memories, your dreams, and not feel the need to escape. Being alone gives you the chance to recalibrate your standards, your values, your goals. It allows you to ask, what do I really want? Without the pressure of someone else's preferences clouding your vision. This is when growth happens. This is when you stop molding yourself into what others expect and start becoming who you were meant to be. Many people lose themselves in relationships because they never took the time to define themselves before entering them. That's why learning to be whole on your own is essential. You don't want to bring an incomplete version of yourself into a partnership and expect the other person to fill the gaps, keepy gaps. That's not love. That's dependency in disguise. It's in solitude that you develop the self-awareness necessary to understand your patterns, your triggers, and your emotional wounds. Instead of suppressing your pain, you give it space to speak. In doing so, you begin to heal it. You start to see the habits that keep you stuck and the mindsets that need to be broken. You build mental strength by not needing constant distraction. You build emotional maturity by being honest with yourself. And you build spiritual depth by realizing that your worth is not determined by external validation, but by your internal alignment. You also begin to find beauty in the little things, the quiet morning routines, the solo walks, the peaceful evenings without background noise. You begin to experience life with a different kind of presence, one that isn't rushed or diluted by social pressure. In solitude, you learn to love the moment you're in rather than always seeking the next thrill or approval. You become more observant, more intuitive, more grateful. You begin to see that fulfillment doesn't come from outside. It comes from the way you choose to see and live your life. So if you find yourself alone right now, don't rush to fill the space. Don't panic. Don't assume something's wrong with you. Consider the possibility that this season is a divine appointment for your transformation, that it's not a punishment, it's preparation. Preparation for deeper clarity, stronger relationships, and a more grounded version of you. Learn to sit with yourself long enough to know who you are, what you want, and what you're no longer willing to tolerate. That kind of clarity only comes in solitude. You were never meant to be afraid of being alone. You were meant to master it. Because once you do, no one can manipulate you with the threat of leaving. Once you are whole by yourself, you stop settling for half-hearted love. And once you find peace within, you stop chasing it in the chaos of others. That's the freedom that comes from embracing aloneness, not as a void, but as a vessel for strength. En sar 1E4. 1 sir ia. 4 sir 1D40. 1 er in there 1D47. 1D40. 1D41 1 winner 1 for dinner. 1D41 for 7 E for there 1D407 architects of disappointment. Spec silent architects are violent to ready walking. They are the invisible contracts we write in our heads, assuming that life, people, and outcomes will unfold in ways that perfectly match our desires or timelines. But life isn't scripted to match our personal fantasies. And the more we grip onto rigid expectations, how people should act, how fast progress should come, how happiness should look, the more we set ourselves up for internal chaos when things don't go as planned. Attachment isn't about becoming numb, indifferent, or careless. It's about staying engaged with life without being emotionally enslaved by outcomes you can't control. Many people confuse detachment with giving up, but true detachment is actually rooted in strength. It means giving your best effort, living with passion and focus, but releasing the need to control how it all unfolds. You love without clinging. You give without demanding. You work without obsessing. You remain open to blessings, but you're not broken if they don't come in the form you expected. This level of emotional independence requires deep inner security, because only someone who knows who they are, who knows their values and purpose, can live without constantly looking outside themselves for reassurance. You know your path, and whether someone cheers you on or walks away, it doesn't change your direction. That's power. You stop chasing people who don't value you. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. And you stop basing your worth on things that can be taken away, titles, money, attention. You stop playing emotional tug of war with people who feed off your reactions. Because when you're no longer hooked by their behavior, they lose their power over you. This is emotional freedom. This is self-respect in action. Letting go of expectations also opens you up to possibilities you never considered. When you're too fixated on one outcome, you can become blind to other paths that might serve you better. But when you're detached, you remain flexible, adaptable, open to redirection. You understand that sometimes rejection is redirection and closed doors are invitations to something better. That kind of mindset makes you resilient. It helps you bounce back faster because your peace isn't fragile. It's rooted in perspective. Detachment is ultimately about trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your path. Trust that life doesn't have to follow your script for it to be meaningful. That even when things fall apart, something greater can be built. You begin to focus more on your responses than your results. You focus on what you can control, your mindset, your effort, your discipline, your attitude, and you release what you can't. Other people's actions, the timing of things, the twists and turns of life. That's where inner peace lives, in the balance between doing your part and letting go of the rest. You said letter 1D4, 4, 1, 6, 4. There 1, 4, 0. And letter 1D4, 0. There 1, 4. 4, 1D4. 1, 8, 1, T4. 0, 1, E4. 1, 4, 1, 0, 1, 4, 0, 0. 4 letter 1d4 0. 0 0 letter 1d4 0 letter 1d social failure when a so offense. But solitude, when embraced intentionally, is not a sign of weakness, it's a mark of maturity. It is within solitude that you begin to truly meet yourself, stripped of distractions, noise, and the masks we often wear in public. In that silence, you are forced to confront your own thoughts, your own insecurities, your own dreams. And while that may sound terrifying at first, it is one of the most powerful steps towards self-awareness and emotional growth. When you choose solitude, not because you're forced into it, but because you value it, you send yourself a message that your own company is not only enough, it's valuable. There's a difference between being alone and feeling lonely. Loneliness is a state of lack. Solitude, on the other hand, is a state of presence. When you're in solitude, you're not trying to fill a void. You're exploring it. You're taking inventory of your mind and soul, understanding your patterns, healing old wounds, and cultivating peace that isn't dependent on who's around you. This kind of time alone is not a punishment. It's a classroom. And when you approach it with intention, it becomes a place where transformation begins. You begin to notice your triggers, your attachments, your tendencies to seek validation or avoid discomfort. You become honest with yourself. And from that honesty comes clarity. Clarity about what you want. Clarity about what you've tolerated for too long. Clarity about the people who lift you up and the ones who drain your energy. Solitude acts like a mirror. It reflects what you often ignore when you're surrounded by noise and distractions. It teaches you what kind of life you're really living versus the one you've been pretending to live. And once you see things clearly, you can no longer lie to yourself. That's where growth begins, because you can't change what you're unwilling to confront, and solitude confronts you with truth. But solitude also sparks creativity and innovation. When you're not constantly reacting to the opinions and emotions of others, your mind begins to wander freely. That space allows you to imagine, to create, to plan. Some of the greatest breakthroughs, whether in art, science, or personal development, were born out of quiet reflection. Alone time is a wellspring of originality because it pulls you away from the groupthink of the crowd and back into the uniqueness of your own mind. If you want to lead, if you want to build, if you want to offer something to the world that is truly yours, solitude is not optional, it's essential. And perhaps most importantly, spending time alone helps you build an unshakable foundation of self-worth. Because when you're comfortable alone, you don't chase love, you attract it. You don't settle for friendships that drain you because you're no longer afraid of walking alone. You don't fear being misunderstood because your own understanding of yourself is already strong. And when life hits you, when people leave, when plans fall through, when seasons change, you're not shattered because your peace was never built on someone else's presence. It was built in solitude. It was built when no one was clapping for you, and yet you kept going. The ability to enjoy your own company is a superpower in today's world. It means you're not easily manipulated. It means you're not living for approval. It means you can think critically, live deliberately, and love deeply, not from a place of need, but from a place of wholeness. So don't just tolerate solitude, honor it, use it, learn from it. Because the more time you spend growing in your solitude, the more powerful, peaceful, and purposeful you become when you step back into the world.